Longtime Mariner great Dan Wilson makes his managerial debut, and the Mariners actually win a series this time. Thank God. Now, what happened throughout this entire series against the San Francisco Giants? You will find out after a word from our sponsor, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a mobile ticketing app for sporting events, concerts, and other events. They make the buying experience easier by the app ranking each ticket from 0 to 10 to see if you are getting a good deal, and you can see exactly where you are sitting. I regularly use that app, and I have had nothing but a fantastic experience with SeatGeek. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get $20 off of your first purchase. Link to the code, app, and website will be in the description, so take advantage, and thank you. And use that promo code RoofTopSports to get your $20 off that purchase, especially for the upcoming Tampa Bay series. Now, what went down? So, as you all know, now before I even explain it even further, hit the like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, as it will help the algorithm of this channel. More importantly, help the growth of this channel, as I have surpassed 2,000 subscribers, and I appreciate all of you for being a part of this journey. Now let's really get into it. So as you can see, just recently, Scott Service, Mariners manager since 2016, he recently just got fired. It was after that disastrous series against the Los Angeles Dodgers, where the Mariners had several opportunities to at least win that series or even take one of three. But yet, Scott Service completely, or shall I say just the Mariners as a whole, was just completely let down. And must I say, Mariners looked dead. Like, their offense, you can tell the body language was just absolutely just not there. It seemed that the messaging was not there at all. And that eventually led to his firing. Now, as much as I didn't like Scott Service, and I didn't think that he was a great manager for the Mariners, or anything good at all, because I still have the visions of the Yordan Alvarez home run against Robbie Ray in the 2022 American League Division Series. As much as I thought that was terrible, as much as I thought he was a terrible manager, I'm going to also say that the way that he was fired was just as terrible, if not worse, because the way Scott Service found out was he found out just as the same timing as we did in our social media and on our phones. And the management didn't even have the guts to even tell him that he got fired, so they basically just ghosted him. I don't even know if they even gave him notifications, so I would imagine after those long years of friendship between Jerry Dipoto and Scott Service, I don't know if they're going to be friends anymore. But nonetheless, it had to be done, and Dan Wilson pretty much was immediately hired. And it's not that he was actually hired as the interim manager. He was actually hired as a full-time, which I found a little bit bizarre. I would think that they would have just put him as an interim basis, but maybe Dan Wilson just wanted... Maybe he wanted more than a commitment because he knows of this organization very well. He's been through the ups and downs, the heights of 95 and 2001, but he was also through the first couple seasons of the Bill Bavasi era. So maybe he was like, I don't know. Maybe he was thinking like, you came to me, my way or the highway. So maybe they made him somewhat of a long-term manager. And there were some like criticisms on how this was going to go, because like the impression that we were all getting, including myself, that I was maybe thinking that this was going to be like some kind of nostalgic hire, and especially when it felt doubled down that they were hiring Edgar Martinez. Now, granted, Edgar Martinez was a pretty decent hitting coach for the Mariners back in the 2015 through 2018. Offense was at best 6th in the league in runs scored, and that was in the 2016 season when the Mariners actually hit over 200 home runs that season, led by Robinson Cano, Kyle Seager, and Nelson Cruz. But as you can tell, Edgar Martinez, he was gone for quite a bit, and now he finally comes back. But as much as many of us may have thought that this was a nostalgic kind of hire, there were some praises, like Brett Boone thought it was a great hire, Jeff Nelson thought it was a great hire, and these were both Mariner greats back at the time. And even great Mariner manager in Lou Piniella even thought that was a good hire. And he even said, and according to the New York Times report, he actually said that if he was the owner and he was able to call all the shots, he would have had Dan Wilson as the manager of the Mariners. And I guess he knows something that we don't. And don't forget, Lou Piniella actually managed Dan Wilson pretty much the majority of Dan Wilson's career from 1994 all the way until 2002, but then Lou Piniella was gone. So Dan Wilson was with Bob Melvin and Mike Hargrove. So Dan Wilson had 3 different managers, but the one, of course, he remembers the most is Lou Piniella. So going into Friday, I didn't really know what to expect. Like, the only things I was looking for was how was Dan Wilson going to manage the game, how he was going to handle his players, how he was going to delegate Edgar Martinez into teaching his batters on how to approach better at the plate, because Mariners are the league leaders in Major League Baseball, in the entirety of Major League Baseball, in strikeouts at a pretty alarming rate. They're even worse than the Chicago White Sox, so Dan Wilson was going to have a challenge ahead of him. Now, before I explain these 3 games of this entire series, now let's get into Game 1 of this 3-game series against the San Francisco Giants. So, I did take some of these notes. Take a look at these. Yeah, check these out. So, here's what I got, and I'll just read it. Not exactly verbatim, but I will just read the notes, and I'll kind of like elaborate it the best I can. So, Luis Castillo, I noticed that he got the first strikeout, as the highlights did show it, because I did rewatch these highlights, and of course you knew that I covered all 3 of these games. But Luis Castillo, he did strike out the first batter, but the first red flag I noticed was he threw like 4 fastballs, and yes, he got the strikeout, but I was thinking, man, is he really going to be fastball reliant? It did seem so, because not long after, Lamont Wade Jr. hit a home run, putting the Mariners, or I'm sorry, not the Mariners, the Giants up 1-0, and that's where I was getting nervous, because he was pitching those fastballs, and they were kind of hanging up the middle. They were like easy pitches to hit. Although he did get 9 strikeouts throughout that game, I was still very concerned of where this was headed, just with the way he was pitching. And the other opposing pitcher of the Giants, I think it was Birdsong. I can't even say his name. He had 5 strikeouts, but he did walk 4 times, and that was the difference that we did see in this Mariners game, that the Mariners were able to draw walks, and I can actually verify how many times the Mariners walked throughout that entire game, and that was of Friday night. And throughout that, the Mariners walked 8 times. And if we compare that to the other games, like let's just say the Dodgers game, just for fun, as the Mariners got slaughtered, and actually that was Wednesday, my mistake, because Thursday was the day they were talking about him getting fired. But if we talk about the Dodgers game, the amount of times the Mariners walked, they only walked 2 times. So if you think about it, like 8 walks or so, that's a pretty massive improvement that just from that game. And yes, that was a blowout, but Mariners did make a huge difference. I mean, I guess Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez, because don't forget, Edgar Martinez, he does a fantastic job with his batting mechanics. So he must have that kind of leadership in himself of how teaching these guys how to approach the plate better and not just swing at pretty much everything. And the other thing I noticed, yeah, I said that the Mariners walked a bit more. Now, the frustrating part was on the bottom of the third. Randy Arozarena had a 3-1 count with the bases loaded, and these were all done by practically walks. He swung on a 3-1 count. I think he swung and missed, and then frustratingly, he popped out, and that's what I was thinking. Like, Dan Wilson, you got to watch this guy, because Randy Arozarena strikes out ridiculously, and the way he does is ridiculous. Like, he swung on a 3-1, and it was clearly outside of the plate. I mean, I don't even know if you could even consider that him being fooled. I think that he was just trying too hard. And I was like, just take the walk, because you've been struggling, so you got to get your confidence going by getting that walk. But he didn't do that, unfortunately. And the next thing you know, not long after, there was some bad fielding by Justin Turner where he did do the wild throw, and Castillo was not able to get there. And then there was that was a wild throw. And then eventually, Michael Conforto would hit a home run, 2-run shot, which made it a 3-0 game. And I was thinking, man, Castillo's really just he's just having a difficult time. Then we get to the bottom of the fourth. Mariners had runners on first and second with nobody out, and they came up with absolutely no runs. And I was thinking, man, is this offense lifeless? Like, is it so much that Jerry Dipoto constructed a horrible lineup? Like, is that what it could be? Like, there's even a split-second thought that maybe this wasn't all on Scott Service. Just for a split-second thought. But then, fortunately, Mariners did come back just a little bit with a Luke Raley home run to left center field to cut it to a 3-1 lead. And then the next inning, or not long after, I'm probably going to be saying that quite a bit, Dom Canzone with his bad fielding, like I think he looks like he took like one step in rather than actually taking a step back, and I think he could have caught that, but he didn't, which led to a very monstrous home run to make it a 5-1 game, and it seemed that this game was out of reach. Like, when you go from between that inning until the bottom of the 8th, it just felt extremely lifeless. Like, when my friend Steve left, I was like, yeah, I don't blame you, man. Just get out of here. Get some sleep, because he does live in Michigan at the moment, because he is making, I guess he does like it there. I don't blame him. But then going into the bottom of the 8th, the Mariners were able to tie the game unbelievably with 6 singles, and they were done. It was completed by Luke Raley with a bloop single to make it 5-5, and 6 singles in a row. Like, it was pretty amazing how that was able to happen to tie that game, which was giving life. And then you saw Andres Munoz pitching a nice, easy 1-2-3. And then another dramatic moment happened in the top of the 10th, where in the top of the 10th, man on second because of the rules, Colin Snyder is pitching, and I believe they got one man out, and then they had one of their better players up, and then Dan Wilson just called the intentional walk. I may have got this backwards or whatever it was, but yeah, Dan Wilson called for the intentional walk. And then Michael Conforto was up with 2 outs, and eventually Colin Snyder struck him out, which I thought was amazing. And the other thing I did like was Dan Wilson let Colin Snyder finish that, because usually if that was 2 outs with the man on first and second and Conforto was up because he is a lefty, I think if Scott Service was the manager, I actually think that he would have pulled Colin Snyder and Taylor Saucedo pitch. And that probably would have been an absolute disaster. And we all know how that would have ended. Probably would have been extra base hits or home runs or single, or the inning just keeps on going. But nope. Dan Wilson just let Colin Snyder just finish the inning, just went with the hot hand, and he struck out the side. And then Dylan Moore was the guy at second base. He stole third, and he hustled throughout this entire series, by the way, which led to Leo Rivas hitting the game-winning hit, and that was a very exciting moment, and that's what I really did like, where Mariners really fought back, and it looks like Dan Wilson, just at least by the first game, he found a way to give life to these players, because I remember in a 97 clip, he said that there's a time and a place where he knows when to be positive, or when he gets the team, or get any of his players and teammates riled up, and get them all fired up to keep competing, and that's what Dan Wilson was able to do, at least for Game 1. And now, before I get into the disastrous Game 2, here's our word from our sponsor, SoFi Bank. SoFi is an online bank and a personal financing company offering financial diverse products. They hold the naming rights to the home of the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers, named SoFi Stadium. They offer amazing checking and savings accounts where you can get up to 4.6% on savings accounts. There are no monthly fees to maintain the accounts, and they have over 55,000 no-fee ATMs around the United States. You even have access to a budgeting program, stock trading, and insurance programs. Join SoFi and get $25 for joining, and or $25 for opening a stock trading account. Links are available in the description, and thank you. And lastly, I am not a financial advisor, so either find a professional financial advisor or go with your own gut. And link will be in the description, and also use that promo code RoofTopSports to get your $25, whether you open a stock account or a bank account. And remember, I am not a financial advisor, so don't take any of my advice if you are asking me any questions about what I think about the stock market or what you should do financially. Go get a financial advisor or whoever that is. Now, going into game 2, Giants had the bases loaded immediately, and this was with George Kirby pitching. And eventually it turned into a sacrifice fly. Arozarena made a nice catch, but then he got shaken up a little bit, which caused, unfortunately, a run to score. I think maybe if he was able to get up and throw home, maybe he could have kept the runner at third base, or maybe he would have gotten out. Who knows? But luckily, and yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it was unfortunate that he was hurt for a moment. I was thinking, man, we're going to lose another guy, as if injuries just keep piling up this team. But it looked like the wind just got knocked out of him, and then George Kirby got out with... He eventually got out of it, and that led to just a 1-0 damage, but it was pretty stressful. And then to make matters worse, Victor Robles got hit when he was trying to attempt a butt, and the worst part of it was it didn't even count as just going to first base, so that means Luke Raley was to take over, and then he hit a fly ball. Michael Conforto made a diving catch, of course. Now, throughout that entire whole Victor Robles thing, the good news about that coming out of it was the x-rays were negative, so he is just day-to-day, so hopefully he'll be back in the action real soon. And he's got to be because of that contract that the Mariners gave him. I'm not saying it was a bad contract, but maybe it was a bit premature to reward someone after having just one good month. Then the Giants scored to make it 2-0, and Kirby was not looking good at all. Like, he's kind of not been himself over the past month, and he is my favorite pitcher on the team and possibly my favorite player on the entire team, but just hasn't been his month. He was just hanging in the fastball too much, leaving pitches right over the plate. And that's what I noticed from George Kirby, and hopefully he can make that adjustment going into the next month, or at least the next series. And then bases were loaded, and everyone walked, because that's how it all happened. Then Leo Rivas, unfortunately, he struck out. And then Mariners didn't really get much out of that. But eventually, they tied the game, which I think that was another inning after that. So they did tie the game with just basically bases loaded jobs. And then Justin Turner, he struck out, unfortunately. Yeah, he struck out. Yeah, pretty pathetic. He struck out, and that was a lost opportunity, which kept it at 2-2. And by the way, the pitcher was Blake Snell, and it's not like he was pitching the lights out when I really did expect him to do so. But he didn't, and then he had to leave early because he was pitching quite a bit. And then finally, Leo Rivas got his first hit. So actually, Blake Snell was actually pitching a no-hitter, but yet the Mariners were able to score 2 runs without even getting a hit. But that also was because of the fact that the Mariners were able to draw walks, which was actually pretty helpful. And it's pretty impressive that how much the Mariners were able to do with walking. I think Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez made that difference. They actually walked 9 times. Although they struck out 12, they somehow made it up with 9 walks. So if there was any positives out of this game, at least in the first 2 games, Mariners were able to draw the walks. Now, granted, it's a bad Giants team, but if you really think about it, they were able to draw walks off of Blake Snell at least. So I guess not too bad. So a lot of differences have already been made where Dan Wilson seems to be doing a better job with his pitcher selections and his pitching management. I mean, he's the catcher, so I would think he would know. And maybe he got some advice out of Lou Piniella, and he saw him the way he managed it. But then, unfortunately, Giants got a base hit, and they got a double, and then a wild pitch, and it turned into an RBI. And then eventually, Mike Yastrzemski, where his grandfather was Carl Yastrzemski, one of the last Triple Crown guys, he hit a home run to make it 4-2. And eventually, the Mariners did at least load the bases in the bottom of the 7th inning. But unfortunately, Randy Arozarena, with 3 balls and not even 2 strikes, he nearly grounded himself into a double play. And luckily, it was bailed out by the review. So it wasn't a double play. Mariners scored, but with Randy Arozarena, he could have done much more damage. But the problem is, and I hope Dan Wilson sees this. And see, I'm already criticizing him just a little bit. Like, I'm just seeing things. I'm not saying he's a bad manager already. I just want him to make some of these adjustments, which includes Randy Arozarena should not be a 4-hitter. I mean, not even a 5. maybe make him at least a 2 guy for now, because he's just not someone that can just drive in runs, and it proves it because his numbers with runners in scoring position is absolutely just putrid. So I would not put Randy Arozarena as a cleanup. That's a feedback I would give to Dan Wilson, is make sure that Randy Arozarena is placed in a better lineup position this time. And then for the rest of the game, Mariners basically just struck out the entire time, and that was the end of it. Now, before I get into the series finale, which was Game 3, which I also covered, and of course I took the notes, here's our sponsor from Glance LED Lighting. Are you looking to optimize your office, studio, or man cave? The Glance LED ticker may be for you. It is a customizable LED display providing real-life sports scores, stock prices, crypto, the news, and even the weather. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get 10% off the purchase, and thank you. And if you would like that 10% off, use that promo code RoofTopSports, and the link is available in the description to take you to that website to buy one of those cool LED things. Man, I intend to get one someday. Just the timing's not there for me yet, but maybe someday, so I can have a nice little studio appeal, so for the back here, and so the Lord Vader can see it. But anyways, now we're going into Game 3, and this was when Robbie Ray was pitching against Brian Wu, who has arguably been the best pitcher on the Mariners starting rotation. And I was actually nervous about this one because I thought Robbie Ray was going to have his opportunity for a revenge game, because let's not forget, Scott Service put in Robbie Ray versus Yordan Alvarez. Yes, which was a terrible decision, and then he got that Tommy John surgery after just his, not Tommy John's surgery, just Tommy John, needed Tommy John because of that first outing he had in 2023 where he got injured. And then the Mariners basically gave up on him. They just didn't want to they didn't want to pay into his contract, so they traded him away for Mitch Haniger. So I thought this was a great opportunity for Robbie Ray to get some kind of revenge, which didn't actually happen because he didn't pitch that long. But let's go into the summary. First, it started with a 2-run home run, and that was all thanks to Josh Rojas with a bad throw to Justin Turner. Justin Turner couldn't catch it, and I think that was just a bad throw by Rojas. Should have been a better fielded. So that led to a 2-run home run by Ramos, second home run of the series. And then next inning, the Mariners were able to somewhat make up for it with Dylan Moore walking. Then he was able to steal second, and then that's where Cal Raleigh hit a RBI single to make it 2-1, but unfortunately the inning ended with a double play, and Cal Raleigh could not get back on time. Then later on, Dylan Moore actually stole 2 bases, amazingly. He got 3 stolen bases in this entire game. He really hustled throughout the entire series, and he did walk quite a bit, so he was actually pretty effective in this series. But unfortunately, the Mariners did not score in all of that. And unfortunately for Robbie Ray's part, he actually left early due to a hamstring injury. Hopefully he is okay. But he left early, so I guess he didn't get much of a revenge at all. And that turned into pretty much a bullpen day. Then Julio Rodriguez grounded into a fielder's choice. It was nearly a double play, and that made it into a 2-2 thing. And then eventually, the Mariners, it was like a kind of a standstill thing. And then once we got later into the inning, the bases were loaded, and then the Mariners scored to make it 3-2. And then Mitch Haniger helped. It was like Mitch Haniger, forgot what he did, but whatever it was, the Mariners scored to make it 3-2, and it was with the bases loaded. And then Josh Rojas, he scored. He helped drive in that run to make it 4-2. So with a 4-2 game, it was a pretty good shot that the Mariners were going to win this, but unfortunately, Grant McCray hits a solo shot off of Colin Snyder, and Colin Snyder had to work himself out of a jam, which he eventually did, and that was with an amazing defensive play by Justin Turner, which he was able to make up for it after his little bit of an error he had with Josh Rojas in the first inning. And then the very last inning, this was very stressful, because Andres Munoz, I believe he gave up 2 walks in this game, but eventually he got out of it with some strikeouts, and eventually on the last hitter, he got that strikeout, and that was a really close game because I really thought that Munoz was not going to survive that one. So the Mariners did end up winning on a score of 4-3, and the Mariners did win that series. Finally took 2 of 3. First time they have won the series was when last time they did was when they swept the New York Mets, which that was a pretty amazing time. But then all those losings against the Tigers, the Pirates, and the Dodgers. But eventually the Mariners put an end to the bleeding with a 2 of 3 against the Giants. And they did it off of Robbie Ray and Blake Snell. So considering how bad the offense kind of performed, they did do well on being able to draw the walks and not make Robbie Ray and Blake Snell dominant. I mean, they took those guys out early. So a couple positive takeaways was they were able to prevent Robbie Ray and Blake Snell from being completely dominant. And they drew 8 walks and then 9 walks. And then for this game, they were able to draw... They drew just 4 walks, but they did do pretty well getting on base at least. And they did at least this time struck out less than 10 times this time. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean for the Mariners going forward, especially with Dan Wilson as the new manager? Now, is it too early to say that he is the manager going forward? He is the manager of the future? Absolutely. It is way too early to say that, even with Edgar Martinez being the long-term. I don't know if he is going to be, and I think he only joined Dan Wilson just because they were friends. They were teammates back then. But key things I did like out of Dan Wilson. I did like that he went with his gut with Colin Snyder on Friday night and let him finish it off against Michael Conforto, although, like usually, Scott Service would have pulled him out for Taylor Saucedo, a lefty, because of the whole lefty-righty matchup, which is a very flawed concept in my opinion. I think it's just completely nonsense, and I think the best way to approach it is if the guy has the hot hand, let him finish it. Other positive takeaways I liked was how the Mariners were able to walk 8 times and then 9 times and 4 times. So if you look at it, they walked 21 times throughout the 3 games of that series. And let me compare those numbers. So the last time on the Dodgers, and I'm kind of mispronouncing everything, my apologies. So they walked only 2 times on Wednesday against the Dodgers. Then on Tuesday against the Dodgers, they walked just 4 times on a 3-game, and this was a 3-game set, must I say. And then against the Dodgers again, they walked just 2 times. So if you think about it, if you go 2 plus 4, that's 6, 8 times. So the Mariners were able to walk 21 times against 8, and in pretty much the majority of those games, 2 of those games, they were able to walk, at least on one of them, they were able to walk more than they did in the Dodgers series when they walked 8 times in 3 games, while the Mariners were able to do 9 in 1 game. So there is an improvement right there, and I think that's where Edgar Martinez was teaching these guys, or at least reminding these guys on to be more patient at the plate. And I did notice that they were a bit more patient, with the exception of like Julio just chasing everything. You had Dom Canzone just chasing everything. You had Randy Arozarena chasing everything. And now I want to get to the negative parts, or like the areas of opportunity for Dan Wilson. And the things I was criticizing him is he's got to shake up that lineup. He's got to put Randy Arozarena as like a 2 guy, or maybe towards the bottom of the lineup. But I think with the talent that you have out of Randy Arozarena, I think you should put him as a number 2. You should not put him as a guy with runners in scoring position, because he just simply cannot score runs. So I would not put Randy Arozarena in a situation like that. So I would make that adjustment going forward. And by looking at that lineup, like maybe have like Julio as a 3 guy, Cal Raleigh as a 4, Randy Arozarena as a 2, and whoever leads off could be Luke Raley, which it was pretty interesting to use him. And I think I did like him as a leadoff. Or if you're going to have Victor Robles, and it looks like Robles and Raley are probably going to be the platoon guys along with Justin Turner between first base. So overall, the bats weren't pretty, obviously. I mean, you only scored up to 6 runs in the other game, 3, and this one 4. But a lot of walks happened. And when you do walks, you do create opportunities to score runs. I mean, Mariners were no hit by Blake Snell, but they were still able to score 2 runs because of their ability to be patient at the plate. But going forward, they just got to do a lot more than that, especially when they're going up against Tampa Bay, and it's not going to be easier against the Giants. And then you're going to go up against the Angels, the A's, Cardinals. It's not going to be easy, although on paper, statistics say that it would be on the favor of the Mariners, but Mariners got to take care of business because they struggled against the Anaheim Angels, or Los Angeles Angels, and they got swept by them in Seattle. Then you go against Oakland, and it's not like Oakland is like last year's Oakland where it was pretty much just free wins. Like, you actually got to earn it this time because you got Mason Miller's a tough guy. Toro's been playing pretty well. Brent Rooker is their best player. So Mariners got to figure that out. And, of course, in St. Louis, Mariners don't seem to play well in St. Louis whatsoever for whatever weird reason. So hopefully going forward, Dan Wilson can make those adjustments and keep what he's doing. Like, trust Colin Snyder, for example. Let him finish the inning. And not go so much with the matchups. And hopefully he will realize that once the rosters open up, maybe consider with Jerry DiPoto calling up like the Cole Young and like Tyler Locklear and send down Dom Canzone because the man's got to go. He cannot compete with this team going forward. And I don't expect him to be part of this team after this season, no matter how it goes. Well, that's going to do it. I just want to say thank you very much for watching this. And if you did like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification, and also use all those promo codes that I sent with that Geek Squad. Why did I say Geek Squad? SeatGeek, SoFi Bank, and Glance LED. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully the Mariners can win the next series. And go Mariners!